action. I just want to give you a little bit of context of what we're talking about and how this came about. Within the trade union movement, for quite some period of time, the climate issue has often been quite narrowly framed in terms of jobs. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's been framed as jobs versus the environment. It's meant that within the trade union movement, the focus has often been on groups of people who work in climate-heavy industries and what's going to happen to their jobs in terms of a just transition. I know all of us on this call will absolutely stand full square behind a just transition and a just transformation of the economy, and ensuring that those people who work in climate-heavy industries are in good, well-paid trade union jobs, if those jobs need to be transitioned in order to tackle the climate crisis. But the climate crisis is not simply an issue for a small part of the trade union movement. The climate crisis is a working class issue. It affects us all, not equally. Working class people are impacted by the climate crisis unequally and have usually contributed less to the climate crisis. It affects our lives, our livelihoods, our workplaces, our public services. It affects our energy bills. It affects our food bills. It is a crisis of which presents itself to the whole of the working class. And the whole of the working class, for us, the solutions are not individual solutions, they are collective solutions. So a number of us wanted that position to be debated within the Trade Union Congress, within TUC, that this is a working class issue affecting all working class people, and trade unions have to have a response to the climate crisis from a trade union and working class position. That motion went to the TUC conference last year. There were debates around it, but that motion was passed eventually unanimously with a couple of abstentions, which means that we now have a position that we can mobilize around within the trade union movement that says, yes, it's a working class issue. And in that motion, it called for a year of trade union climate campaigning on action. Now, no disrespect if there are any, and I hope there are, supporters, workers for the TUC here, but we all know that motions like that will not materialize into meaningful action unless there is a grassroots mobilization around it across as many workplaces and trade unions as possible. So from there, what we've done is we've worked with activists and a whole number of unions, many of whom are on the call today, to make sure that a motion along those lines and calling for support for a trade union year of climate action goes to their national union conferences. And that's quite exciting because it does mean that we'll have 5 or 6 national unions. My own union, NEU, has already passed that motion at its conference in Easter, talking about how do we organize for a year of trade union action. So now it's about how do we take the next steps to make this a meaningful year of action. The final thing I want to say, two things I want to say is that there's an added impetus here, which we can see how the far right are trying to use the climate crisis to divide working class communities, feeding off some of the fear and despair that people feel, to suggest that so-called and non-existent in many places green policies are the cause of a lack of jobs in the area, are a cause of high energy prices. All of this we know is lies, and in the strip seam of that picks up a retreat from any decent policies from Starmer's Labour government, and of course bolstered by Blair's recent intervention. Liar, liar, pants on fire, still telling lies like he did over the so-called weapons of mass destruction to help another American president launch a vicious assault on Iraq. So that's what gives us another impetus. We cannot allow those lies to sit within working class communities, within our trade union movement. We have to challenge them and take up those lies. So final thing I want to say is this: we should see today's meeting as opportunity to discuss why it's a working class issue, to hear what is happening in some unions already, to think about ideas that could make a meaningful year of climate action. I want to throw a final thing in here to get us thinking about that. We, in our motion, called for us to work alongside the broader climate movement and climate justice movement. So we should think about layers of what we're doing. The climate justice movement in the UK is mobilising across this year in preparation for the COP, which will take place in Brazil in November. Now, we have no faith that COPs give us the answers to the climate crisis that we need. But how symbolic is that? That the COP is taking place in Brazil, in the Amazon rainforest. This is our opportunity to call for the kind of actions we do need on the streets, in communities, in our workplaces, in our trade unions. There are already 2 days of action have been called on for the climate justice movement, and that's the 14th and the 15th of November. They are already days that are out there as global days of action, and we should be thinking how we kind of coincide, if you like, the launch of this year of trade union climate action with those dates of mobilizations. It doesn't preclude action on either side, absolutely not, but that would be a great place for us to start a year of trade union climate action, standing alongside climate activists as part of an international mobilization to call for the things that we need within working class communities to tackle the climate crisis.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good to see you all here. So first of all, for anyone who's still doubting that the climate crisis is a working class issue, I thought I'd give a couple of examples. So around about a year ago, when crops failed in India, the people affected were small-scale farmers, and the people who suffered from food insecurity were their families. And those who noticed the resulting price rises globally on food were people on low incomes having to resort to food banks. Second example, when extreme heat hit the UK in 2022, classrooms in crumbling state school buildings rose to 40 degrees and were intolerable, partly because of overcrowding, large numbers in classes, and lack of trees outside, while the pupils in Eton remained in classes of 9, surrounded by established trees in leafy grounds that helped to lower the temperatures. Now, these are only 2 examples, but what we see across work sectors and in education is that climate change demonstrates, I think, how all the elements of injustice, underfunding, and lack of investment converge to create a perfect storm. So when there's extreme rain on crumbling schools, leading to asbestos damage, which leads to asbestos exposure of our workers and industrial deaths in schools and hospitals, but also lack of funding for green investment in retrofitting prevents the public sector and its buildings benefiting from reduced energy costs of solar power and heat pumps. So more vicious circles that keep the rich rich and the poor poor. Yes, it's definitely a working class issue. And also, while Eton continue with their broad, balanced curriculum, specialist subject teachers, producing prime ministers of the future, our working class kids are denied the opportunity to, 1, learn the truth about climate change and what causes it and how to mitigate it, and 2, to spend their days connected to nature. Now, the risk, of course, when people feel disenfranchised and they feel that governments don't speak for them and that this perfect storm has come together and is affecting them and their lives and their livelihoods and their ability to afford a home, even though they're working full time, et cetera, is that people turn to other options. They say politicians, people in Westminster don't speak for me. And then you get the risk of people moving to the far right, believing the misinformation that they read, generated by AI algorithms, et cetera, and they start to pick the wrong enemy. Yes, the NEU was really proud to support the TUC motion on a year of climate change trade union action. And we passed our own motion on this as well a few weeks ago at our own annual conference. We speak for educators in the National Education Union, but we also speak for children when we say that this is a crisis that needs placing at the heart of what we do, and education must be front and centre of any action we take to combat the misinformation that is now everywhere. Since our motion was passed, our climate network has already sprung into action, I'm happy to say, with plans being hatched for a spring conference, half-termly webinars and regional network meetings. But we're clear that these are things, as Suzanne said, that need to spark action at the grassroots, because without that, they won't generate change. So our members are excited to be part of the Heat Strike campaign and the planned boycott of the Science Museum STEM projects, which are sponsored by Adani and BP and leading to more greenwashing. And also they're excited about proposed mobilisations around the time of COP30 and on the idea of campaigning alongside others in the climate movement, such as Global Justice Now and Fuel Poverty Action, some of whom are represented in this meeting today, I know. It's clear that we need everybody on board for change to happen. And similar discussions are happening worldwide. So in the 3 years that I've been on the International TUC COP WhatsApp group, I've noticed that posts have evolved a bit. They used to be kind of dry discussions of texts, but now you're seeing photos of activists out on the streets, whether it's in India over food insecurity, whether it's in Nigeria over their demands to be included as trade unions in the nationally determined contributions ready for the next COP. But they're out there, they're on the streets, they're with banners, and we're seeing their faces. And I find that really encouraging. So the world's changed a lot. As the world changes, we have to change with it. It's time for us to put everything that we have into turning all of our activists and reps into climate activists and green reps. And I hope that this meeting will be a catalyst for that. So thanks for inviting me.
Because it's not necessarily explained to people. When people talk about climate change, they sometimes think that we're talking about protecting polar bears, when actually what we're talking about is food prices going up. It's extreme weather events, you know, and not having the protection for, you know, that kind of thing. It's also your energy prices going up, you know, and that's where my FPA hat comes in with some of you might be aware of our flagship campaign already, Energy for All, and that campaign is calling for a free energy guarantee to cover all of the basics. And we think we can do this by ensuring that the rich and the polluters pay more, you know, because at the moment our pricing system is the wrong way round, you know, with things like the standing charge, those who use less energy pay more per unit than people with swimming pools and mansions who pay more per unit. But there's a reason why that campaign also appealed to me, and it was, you know, largely because of the retrofit element of it. You know, we live in some of the dampest, leakiest housing in Europe. I've been made ill by my housing before. I've caught, you know, many chest infections and pneumonia to the point where I even once actually broke a rib from coughing. And this is what like our housing stock is doing. We all know how bad this is. And the idea of having this incentive to really incentivize energy efficiency by having this, you know, our essential needs covered and then putting the burden onto the state and to other organizations to ensure that, you know, our retrofitting is actually done properly. Now, we've also recently partnered with a few other organizations, the Peace and Justice Project, ACORN, as well as the Campaign Against Climate Change and the Greener Jobs Alliance to launch the Retrofit for the Future campaign. This campaign has 3 core demands. The first one is a skills element, you know, ensuring that we've got enough skilled workers, and we need it very fast to ensure that there are enough people trained and adequately qualified to do this. The other thing is that we need to protect renters from being evicted, you know, when these things happen. And finally, we also need to ensure that the retrofits is accountable to the residents. So that's the retrofit element of that. But also in terms of just before I finish as well, I just want to talk about something else, because we'll be reframing our campaign soon. Because at the moment, the government, energy companies and government are spending billions in subsidies for wind and solar farms to be turned off during the windiest and sunniest periods. You know, and we think that this energy, rather than they can store it and sell it back to us at premium, this should go to households for free, which is plentiful and free of charge. So yes, that's where we stand on this. And then going forward in terms of actions, in October, we'll be doing, and we've already agreed FPA, we'll be doing a National Day of Action on the 1st of October. And also going forward with events like the TUC conference. We've been partnering as well with the Climate Justice Coalition, Green New Deal Rising, and we'll be doing a fringe event at TUC conference this year as well. So yeah, keep your eyes peeled for that. And yeah, thank you for having me. I'll try and keep it short. I think I just went slightly over, so thank you.
much. Sorry that I can't stop on the meeting for very long. I'm splitting myself into 273 tonight, it feels like, but I thought it was important that we were here and we were present, because we know the climate and ecological crisis is not just an environmental issue, it's fundamentally a working class issue, and that's why we're all here on this meeting tonight. And for our union, you know, we know that working class people are already feeling the sharp end of the crisis in rising food and energy prices that stretch pay packets thinner, but also impact our members doubly, because they're also feeling the pressure from their employers that are saying they can't afford to give them pay rises because they're experiencing the same. We know in our homes that they overheat in the summer. I thought I'd found a quiet place outside, so apologies if you can hear the hand dryer going next to me. It's in our homes, they get hotter during the summer, you know, and the flood in the winter. Our members experience that in their workplaces, and we know that there are impacts in our communities where air is polluted, green space is limited, and public services are under pressure. In industries where our members work, whether it's food production, logistics, agriculture, climate change threatens our members' health, their jobs, their safety, the stability of their working lives, and they're the ones that are paying the price for actions and decisions that they've, you know, not had anything to do with. So we believe at the BFAWU that the climate crisis can't be tackled without confronting economic injustice, and that's why I'm pleased to say that our executive have agreed today to join the Year of Climate officially. Whilst we haven't a specific motion to our own conference about it, it was agreed that the motions that we've passed in the last 2 or 3 years, you know, supporting heat strike, supporting the other motions from the campaign against climate change in other areas were enough for our EC to be able to sign up to it. And of course, there was the TUC motion last year that we voted for. So now, once we finish EC at the end of the week, we'll begin working through the plan that we've got, how we engage with it, how we develop internal resources. They may not be as snazzy as the NEU ones, but we will do our best. Because let's be right, they are pretty fantastic normally. How we educate and raise awareness with our members. You know, we've got Heat Strike attending our conference because our conference now does conference business in the morning and mandatory fringe meetings in an afternoon. So we will have Heat Strike there to do one of those fringe meetings so that we can ensure that our members are informed and our branches have got the information that they need, because we know we need a just transition, one that protects jobs, creates new unionised roles in green industries and invests in the future of working class communities, not just corporations. But we need our members, and we understand we need our members, their families and the wider communities to understand that, and not in a position where climate policy is kind of pushed down from above, but one where our members, your members, the working class, are building up those policies and leading in those discussions. So the climate fight is a class fight, and unions like ours and everybody's on this call need to be at the front and centre of that. So it's fantastic that I can share that news with you tonight. We'll put some comms out later in the week, and yeah, let's get working together and make this Year of Climate something that we all remember, we all engage with, and that doesn't just stop September 2026. Thank you.
Thank you, Paillard. Yeah, I'm from the Unite Grassroots Climate Justice Caucus, which is a network of Unite members and reps who want to see more radical climate action in our unions. And friends and comrades, we live in dangerous times, facing so many horrors and injustices that keep us busy campaigning with the ongoing genocide in Gaza and campaigns against the rise of the far rights. We've seen attacks on Black and brown people, disabled people, trans people, migrants and women growing alongside the rise of the extremes. And on top of this, we've got the inevitable looming climate and environmental crisis, which is already upon us. But since COVID, we've seen the climate movement has taken a setback with the collapse of the youth climate strike and XR to an extent. The trade union movement has been focusing on the cost of living crisis and the usual bread and butter issues, but we can see that things are already shifting and affected our Unite members. Thousands of fossil fuel jobs have gone from the North Sea in the past 10 years. Thousands of job losses in Port Talbot with the introduction of electric furnaces, over 400 jobs going with Grangemouth refinery closure, and the same numbers of jobs going at Luton Stellantis car plant. The bosses and corporations are trying to make us think that this is because of net zero, but that's bullshit. They've done it for years to cut costs, to produce cheaper, to make more profit. To face this, it's necessary we build a mass movement of multiple alliances of collaboration. We need to make the climate crisis real for people. We need to connect it to our everyday survival, our empty pockets and life struggles. Because the climate crisis is a working class issue. It's not a problem of rich people. They'll be okay in their bunkers and gated communities with private armies to defend them. Neither it's a cause only for the middle classes, because working class people are paying already and will pay the price for this climate crisis if we don't bring back climate justice to the center of our trade union struggles. Already, it is the poorest in flooded communities that struggle to rebuild or move away from affected areas. Already, it is workers in industries and their communities bearing the brunt of mass job losses. It is working class communities breathing polluted air, not able to heat their homes or buy healthy food. It is working class communities unable to afford transport or extra charges for low pollution zone. It is workers in all sectors that are feeling the recurring heat waves and the effect of climate change on their workplaces. And whether you work in health on the front line of the NHS or as a supporting care workers for the elder, homeless people or disabled people, you already know about the impact of heat waves on those who you care for. If you work in hospitality on a precarious contract, in a factory on low pay, or outdoors in construction, or as a migrant worker on a farm, you'll know what happened to you at work when it's over 30 degrees. And for our year of trade union action, we need to make it real for people. We desperately need trade unions to step up their games on climate justice, and the year of trade union climate action is a great opportunity to just do that. So we need you to help activate and lobby your unions to ensure they engage and take it seriously, that they put time and resources in organizing activities during the year of action. We need you to go back to your workplace, your trade union branch and trades councils, and start discussing ideas on how you can play a role in it, which group you should connect with, what moment you may seize for activities. It could be creating a climate grassroots network in your union, like we have in Unite. And we've got a motion going to our conference to support the year of trade union action. You could organize workplace initiatives, protest in collaboration with other groups, education sessions for workers, spaces to discuss and vision what a workers-led just transition could look like for your local area. You could organize gatherings locally or online. You could leaflet workplaces, organize lunchtimes walkouts. You could do banner drops or hold stalls or climate cafes to connect with your local communities. You could organize your May Day or International Women's Day or Black History Month events around the theme of climate justice. You could organize and support local campaigns for retrofitting or free public transport and make sure your unions are part of it. We want it all to be visible and connected. Connecting with health campaigners and health and safety reps and engaging them into the heat strike campaign in the summer is a great way to have a very concrete issue to engage workers across all sectors. You can also talk to your local climate groups to build those bridges between workers and climate activists, but also with other social justice groups, equalities and anti-war campaigners, tenant unions, food justice, land justice, or energy justice campaigner, to make sure this year of trade union climate action is indeed intersectional and connected to our communities.
And UNISON has members across all the public services that are affected directly and indirectly by climate change. And of course, that's only going to increase as the climate emergency gets worse. And I was thinking through what that meant. So, for instance, you know, you look at health and care sectors where you think our members are dealing with the impact of climate change on the health of people who they care for, the huge increase in workload that is for people, never mind them having to work in much worse conditions. And I mean, Jenny's already talked about schools and colleges, but also add on to what she said, the cost of heating and cooling in what are often crumbling and run down buildings impacts on the budget and therefore on the resources, on staffing, on the kind of things that our members can do. And of course, we have members in energy where you know, our demand for reducing the reliance on fossil fuels means that actually having a serious, meaningful, just transition to renewables is actually really, really important. And of course, we have members in the Environment Agency who deal with floods and droughts and other climate change impacts. So if you're serious about what you're going to do in your union, you have to be serious about the climate emergency. And of course, in many of those areas that I mentioned where we organise as well, as I think Clara was just saying, it's a global workforce. You walk into your local hospital, into your local care home in particular, and you see members who have come from all around the world and who have families still living all around the world. And they are the people who contribute the least to the climate emergency, but actually suffer the most. And I'll come back to that in terms of one of the things that we can maybe do as well. But I think beyond all of those kind of very real reasons for trade unions taking the climate emergency seriously, I think there's one overarching thing as well. And the fact is, a trade union should be part of a movement that wants not just a better workplace, but also a better world. And we have to be absolutely upfront about that. We are part of society. We are part of what society should look like. And therefore, we should be part of demanding the change to the kind of society and the kind of world that we want. So there's many, many varied reasons for the climate emergency being important for trade unions. And of course, we saw last year, you know, after rolling back on various green pledges, Keir Starmer saying that fiscal rules come first. And I think we have to be really clear as trade unionists to say that there are no fiscal rules on a dead planet, that this has to be a priority for what we do, and that will mean challenging our political leaders as well. And we have to be absolutely upfront about that, I think. And we have to arm our members with how we take that up. It's highly likely that Donald Trump is going to visit in September, you know, one of the world's biggest climate deniers, who is, you know, absolutely against any kind of move to net zero. I think we have to be part, as trade unions, as climate activists, we have to be part of building the biggest possible reception committee that we can for Donald Trump. And obviously that's not a welcoming reception committee. That's a reception committee that's saying we don't want you here, and we don't want your policies here either. UNISON has a Green Week in September. Who knows if it'll be the same week as Trump being here? But pre-pandemic, at the height of the students taking climate action, we decided on you know, when the TUC backed action on one of the Septembers, that's how we ended up with September week. In my branch, we organised a lunchtime rally, and we got the council to ring the alarm because it was a climate emergency. And we got 400 people came out for a lunchtime rally, and quite a lot of us joined the school students demonstration in the afternoon. I think we need to think about, can we do that kind of thing either in the Green Week, or indeed on the 14th and 15th of November when COP's going about. But Clara talked about different things that we could do around the climate. I think Refugee Week, we have to be really upfront about what we can do for climate refugees. So I'm running out of time to say this. I think there's lots more things that we can take climate activities around in a branch. But I think let's oppose reform and their net zero agenda. Let's get more green reps and toolkits and things that arm our members to take action over the climate emergency. But actually, let's all work together with the other unions and with climate campaigners to have the most effective year of climate activity that we can. Thanks.
Some closing comments, and then we can wrap up. We've done pretty well on time.
We have done pretty well on time, and we've done pretty well on the really fantastic engagement, ideas, and creativity as ever that people have brought to this conversation. So there is going to be a year of trade union climate action. That is official policy of the TUC, and people like ourselves are going to make that happen and make it something meaningful and impactful. The second thing is there is now a lineup of unions that are taking that forward into their own unions. On my list is the NEU, PCS, Bakers, UCU, UNISON. It's on the Unite agenda, and I'm sure that I have missed out one of the national unions that is currently moving forward to have that become their national union policy. It's then up to us to make this happen on a meaningful way in our own unions, and then link together. Many people on the chat have said, how can we share ideas? What can we do? We'll get a page set up on the Campaign Against Climate Change website. We will run future events like this, and keep people in touch with the developments that are taking place. Thank you. It's an intersectional issue. It connects with the crises that we face as working class people. And we know that the far right are trying to divide us on this issue, as they are trying to divide us on so many issues. And we also know that Starmer's government are not a bulwark against this. So we have to make our own resistance to that and win in the working class. One of the ideas that's definitely come up is about how can we create themes that people can join in and unite up around. Mel mentioned earlier about the intersectionality of it and reaching out to Black and Asian communities to take part, to be involved, to lead. The transport was mentioned in the session that I was in. The heat strike has been mentioned several times. We need to look at how we can theme a year of trade union climate action that makes a difference if we win, if we organise and we win on this. And we'll look to putting a theme together. The 14th and the 15th of November are global days of action that coincide with the COP. Friday is a work day. We could be doing stuff in our workplaces and our communities on that day. Let's see what we can build up around that idea of mass workplace action on Friday, November the 14th. And Saturday will be a day of demonstrations. Let's bring us with our banners, with our ideas, with our creativity, with our demands onto those demonstrations. Now, that is not the only stop-off points, but they are stop-off points that we can have already coming out of this meeting. This is the start, and we're gonna do some good stuff. We're gonna make a difference, and we're gonna put climate issues at the heart of the trade union movement, and climate working class demands at the heart of the broader climate justice movement. Thanks, everybody. Great start. Brilliant stuff.